Let's create our first function app over on Azure. In the starter solution, there's an API call that calls into an Azure SQL database. This is the call to get the itineraries. I'm going to take that and rebuild it as an Azure function. So I choose to create a new resource over on the portal, and I choose to create a function app down here. The first thing we can choose here is the hosting option. This is important because this will define how your function scales and how costs are calculated. The default is the consumption plan. Automatic scaling, pay-as-you-go billing, the default true serverless approach. But it also comes with disadvantages, like for example the fact that a function can only run for 10 minutes. So this is not a good approach if you're looking for a durable function. Flex consumption is, well, a little bit more flexible. It's also a serverless approach, but it allows you to enable reducing cold starts by having a set of instances of functions that are always on. Here too, the maximum amount of time for a function execution is 10 minutes, so it's not a good match for durable functions. Then there's the premium plan. This is not a pay-as-you-go plan, so it's typically used when your function apps run almost continuously. It does make pricing a bit more predictable, and it enables premium functionality like more powerful instances and connections to virtual networks. It also enables long-running functions. At least 60 minutes are guaranteed. So if you need durable functions, this is a good plan. The dedicated or app service plan allows you to run on, well, an app service plan, which can be the same one you used for your web API host. This is not consumption-based, as app service plans cannot be consumption-based, but it is very predictable billing-wise, and it allows you to manually scale. But it is not serverless anymore. Lastly, container apps is the plan you need when you wish to deploy your function to a container. As you can see, lots of things to consider here. There's a very useful page over on Microsoft's documentation site, which you can find via the link on screen. This can be used as a reference point to help you with deciding what is right for your use case. I'm going to go for the full-on serverless approach here, the consumption plan. Let's click select. Alright, then we need to fill out a few basics for this resource. This should be familiar by now, as most of these things come back for most Azure resources. Let me select my subscription. The Visual Studio Enterprise subscription is the one I'm still using, and I'm going to select the Travel Inspiration resource group again. That's the one we've been using up until now in the Getting Started course. As far as naming the function app goes, I'm going to stick to the naming principles used in the Getting Started course. So I'm going to start with the name of the department inside of the fictional company we're building this for. We are developers, so we are the application development group for our company. Therefore, app dev. Then I add an abbreviation of the resource type, func for function. Up next, the environment, dev, and the region, West Europe. And lastly, something that functionally describes the function, travel, inspiration, itineraries, for example. I'm going to use .NET as the runtime stack. And then we need to decide on the version. By doing so, we also choose a model for that version. The isolated worker model is an option, and the in-process model is an option. In the in-process model, the function code runs in the same process as the function's host process. In the isolated worker model mode, the function code runs in a separate .NET worker process. The in-process mode used to be the default, but it is being phased out. .NET 8 is the last version that will have support for that, which also means that official support for that model will end when official support for .NET 8 ends, and that is November 2026. Maybe when you're watching this course, it's already not supported anymore. So the way to go is the isolated worker model mode. Obviously for .NET 8, which is the latest version at moment of recording. As region, I'm going to select West Europe, and I'm going to stick to Windows as operating system. On the next tab, we can choose the storage account that our function will be linked to. And that may sound a bit weird. Why is this even needed? Well, I mentioned bindings before, right? Well, the state for that is maintained in Azure Blob Storage. Next to that, various parts from Blob Storage, Azure Files, Queue Storage and Table Storage are potentially used by functions depending on the consumption plan you're using, the trigger you need, and whether or not your function is durable. I'm going to select the storage account I already have here, my app dev st dev we travel storage account. That's also the one we've been using up until now. Alright, on the networking tab then I want to enable public access because we want this API endpoint to be publicly accessible. On the next tab, I can enable monitoring via application insights. That is a good idea because it enables rich monitoring scenarios. Let me choose the one we set up in the Getting Started course. I'm going to leave deployment options as is. And I'm also going to leave the tags as is, so I'm not going to add any tags here. Let's click Review and Create. That's looking good. Let's click Create. And our function app resource is being deployed in the background. While we wait for that to be deployed, if you prefer not to use the Azure portal to create the function app, you can achieve the same with the Azure CLI. The command you're looking for is AZ function app and its subcommands. The create command will create a function, and here you can see the various parameters you can pass through. All of these match the things we just configured via the portal. Deployment has succeeded. Let's go to the resource. Let's have a look at the overview blade here. Here on the right we see the URL where we can find our function app. Let's trigger that. Nice, we're up and running, but there is no code being executed yet. Let's continue.